Hey everyone, welcome back to another video here on the channel. This week Chevy was kind enough to send me the new 2025 Chevy Equinox RS to test and review. Now over the last 6 days or so with this vehicle, I've certainly had several things I found that it does very well, but there's going to be a handful of smaller items that add up cumulatively that have somewhat disappointed me, because some of those items that I dislike are traditionally things that GM has done well over the last several decades, and for some reason this vehicle in particular tends to buck that trend and actually does it not necessarily poorly, but doesn't execute it quite as well as they have, like I said, over the past several generations. So without further ado, let's not waste your time. Take a look at what I like and dislike about the new 2025 Chevy Equinox RS. So as usual, starting out with my list of likes for the Equinox, the first one has to do with its styling. Now I know styling is always a subjective matter, but I think GM and Chevy in particular has been on a roll with their exterior styling, in specific in their latest product offerings. Everything from the cheapest entry-level Chevy Trax all the way up to the new refreshed Tahoe and all-new Traverse. I think the Equinox is no different. It suits within the Chevy lineup quite well, and I like the fact that Chevy has offered different trim levels of the Equinox, including LT, Active, and RS, that not only changes the exterior appearance but also changes a lot of the interior materials and color combinations depending on the style and obviously subjective look that you want when you're shopping for one of these vehicles. So everything from the full exterior lighting that does have a little bit of pulsing animations when you walk up to or walk away from the vehicle, to the interior red blue accent contrast stitching. Everything about the Equinox, especially here in the RS and the new Lakeshore blue exterior, looks very nice, and I don't think many people out there will be very disappointed to see this out on the roadway. Now my second like with this Equinox has to do with its seat comfort, but that does however come with a small caveat, which I will mention here in a second. So as part of this new 2025 Equinox, Chevy has redesigned these seats, the materials used, as well as of course the actual seat design, and I think they did a fantastic job for the average person out there. Now the way that this RS is equipped, it has both a fully power driver's seat and passenger seat with power lumbar adjustment. Heated and ventilated front seats and heated seats in the back are going to be available as well. And the only complaint I have about the actual seats themselves and the comfort that they do provide might be limited somewhat to my body type and my situation, but I know there are going to be some other people out there, and it comes down to the headrest comfort and somewhat of the lack of adjustability that the headrest does have. So the issue I do come across occasionally inside vehicles, some of which I have mentioned on the channel, is that the headrest tends to push your head a little bit too far forward, and then your visibility kind of starts to go down, and you really have to adjust the seat back a little bit farther back than you do wish, just to get a straightforward position when you're inside the vehicle, instead of craning your neck, pushing it down like this. And unfortunately, the Blazer EV is like that in terms of Chevy's lineup, and I think the Equinox EV, or excuse me, the Equinox here in this vehicle is a part of that as well. So as long as you're okay, with the adjustments that they do have inside this vehicle, the overall cushioning, the leather material, the heated ventilated seats, everything about these seats, including the appearance, are absolutely phenomenal outside of the headrest, which I wish just had a little bit of a different design and or adjustability in the fore and aft motion. Now moving on to my third like with the Equinox, that has to do with the overall physical space inside this vehicle in all aspects. Now the Equinox sits within the compact SUV class, obviously more in the mainstream segment, although it does have a lot of nice features and amenities. But the Equinox has always done a fairly good job at its space utilization, given the overall footprint and size that the vehicle was. And I think this Equinox is no different. So in the front seats, you have a very good amount of passenger space. Here in the second row behind my seating position that I've been driving in, I have, easily 6 inches or more of legroom, tons of footroom down below, and headroom is going to be not an issue with 3 inches of headroom, given that this one does not have the optional panoramic sunroof. Now, even continuing on in the cargo area, this is again going to be a pretty strong suit of the Equinox. You have a ton of cargo space, a ton of underfloor storage above the temporary spare tire that's located even further down inside the vehicle. And of course, the seats do fold down 60-40 split. So I really do like that about the Equinox. I think it's a very utilitarian vehicle, not only for passengers, but also cargo. And that's obviously likely one of the reasons why you see so many of these vehicles out on the roadway, not only in rental fleets, but also personally owned vehicles, because I think that is a factor to consider when you're looking at a smaller family type of SUV. Now, my next like with the Equinox actually has to do with its center console design, and more specifically the wireless charging design. So as a whole, here in the center console, it's kind of divided up into different sections, also incorporating the drive mode selection for the actual, powertrain and vehicle itself. So starting out here just below the climate controls, you have a USB-C and USB-A data port. Kind of glad it still has a USB-A, given that there are older cables out there and not everybody has upgraded to the newest standard. But just below that, it's going to be a large storage cubby, which you can place any items that you want kind of in that area. Then just behind that, you have the wireless charging pad, if equipped, at a good angle to where the device not only doesn't slide around or move around too much, but it doesn't move off of the wireless charging pad itself, at least in terms of my types of driving. And it was always, very easy to place your phone in there, take it out when needed, and it's just, easy to access, which typically, depending on the model, is not always the case. Now, just behind that, there's the drive mode selection dial, which looks very nice, finished in the gloss black and chrome accents. Two large cup holders, which do fit my Yeti 20-ounce Rambler tumbler all the way to the bottom, which the Encore GX last week did not. So the cup holders are equal size, and they are in a very good position, in my opinion, because they're out of the way of where your hand normally rests using the armrest. There's another small storage cubby just behind the drive mode selection here. And then, of course, you get to the center console, which is finished in a nice soft touch padded material. Does open, features a little small cubby with a deeper cubby inside and a little LED light. And as a whole, I think the center console, despite it not being the most luxurious here on the sides in terms of its materials, is very nicely laid out. And one other thing I forgot to mention is underneath the center console, there's even more storage space down here, although the height is a little bit of a limitation for items going down there. But there's a good amount of storage and utility in the center console, and I think GM did a fairly good job laying this out, especially for the wireless charging pad if you plan to use that on a daily basis. Now, my next like has to do with the wireless Android Auto and Apple CarPlay connectivity that this vehicle does have, and more specifically, its reliability. I have not once had Android Auto either disconnect from driving around or not connect upon starting and getting inside the vehicle and using it. It connects fairly quickly in 20-25 seconds or so, and like I said, it's dead reliable. I have not had one issue with connectivity, and it's a little bit of an outlier from some of the other vehicles I have tested over the recent weeks and months, given I've had at least one or two hiccups over my last 6 or 7 days of driving those vehicles. But that is actually not the case for General Motors and a couple other manufacturers out there in specific. So good on General Motors for offering it inside the Equinox. I think consumers overall really do like that functionality, and I know that is unfortunately not available in all the new recent electric vehicles, and I've heard rumors that it might be going away from gas vehicles in the future. But at least here for the 2025 Equinox, it is still found inside this vehicle, works extremely well, and looks pretty good on this 11-inch touchscreen display. So that brings me to my final like about this Equinox, which I think is a huge standout one I really want to touch on here in this video, and that's going to be the ride quality, the NVH, as well as the powertrain refinement. Now we'll kind of break these out into separate categories here, but starting out with the ride quality, this is something that I think most people will immediately notice how smooth this vehicle is over your daily commute, broken pavement out on the road, or just pretty much driving around in general. Soaks up bumps very, very well. It's a well-damped vehicle. Handling is pretty darn good, despite that not being obviously one of the core competencies, given that it's just a mainstream SUV. But for your average drive, it's very, very comfortable. And then you throw in those seats, like I said earlier on this video, and I think that is certainly a combination and highlight that a lot of people notice. Now, in terms of NVH, this again is a strong suit, given the vehicle itself feels a little bit more heavier, more of a higher build quality, despite the materials on the inside not being ultra luxurious. When you're opening and closing the doors, feeling around the cabin, driving over broken pavement, it just feels like a rigid chassis. It's fairly quiet on the inside, although there are some, wind leaks that come through some of the rubber seals, which might be specific to this vehicle, might be just a design issue. But I think all around, it's a very, well-refined, solid, rigid feeling vehicle going down the roadway. And I think, NVH is on the lower side and, a positive aspect. Now, finally touching on that powertrain, it is going to be powered by the same 1.5 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder that was offered in the previous Equinox, either with an 8-speed automatic for all-wheel drive or a CVT equipped transmission for front-wheel drive Equinoxes. But the way that this powertrain is, refined and dialed in and tuned, it's extremely smooth. You almost don't feel the transmission shifts, especially once it's up to operating temperature. The engine stop-start system at stoplights, stop signs is extremely smooth, smoother than that of average for gasoline-only powered vehicles, excluding hybrids and whatnot. And I think, all around, despite it being down on power versus some of the competition, it's a very smooth, easy to drive, easygoing, relaxed driving experience. And that is one thing that I certainly actually did really enjoy about this Equinox versus some of the other competitors in this space. So I think that's gonna do it here for all my likes with the Equinox. Now let's get into my list of dislikes. And like I mentioned at the beginning of this video, some of these are a little bit of an outlier, at least from what traditionally GM has excelled at. Okay, so starting out with my list of dislikes, I'm gonna go ahead and just set the camera up here, overlay some B-roll footage explaining some of this as best as possible so I don't hopefully ramble on too long. Now, my first dislike is gonna sound like an extremely trivial one, and that's gonna be the power or volume knob illumination, specifically at nighttime. Now, I got inside this vehicle, I noticed the dash illumination was set a little bit differently, so I went over here to the left of the steering wheel, bumped up the dash illumination to where I liked it when driving at nighttime. But the power button, for whatever reason, stays at like full brightness no matter what time of day it is. And it's a standout feature when you're driving when it's mostly dimmed here on the interior. That is like a blinding white light up here on the black dashboard. And I don't understand why that doesn't necessarily dim when the headlights turn on or when the rest of the dash dims in low light situations. So maybe it's a software bug, maybe it's something that they can implement or improve over time. I would think that's fairly easy to implement. But the white power button, for whatever reason, stays full brightness even at pitch black situations. Now, my second dislike with the Equinox, unfortunately, is not limited to only the Equinox, and I first actually saw this in the 2024 Blazer EV when I drove it from Dallas, Texas, all the way back up here to the Quad Cities. And it's actually something I've experienced in 4 or 5 GM models at this point, and that is the turn signal stalk. Now, the issue I have with it is not only it doesn't, click, or the detents aren't necessarily great in terms of, turning left or right, but the main issue I have with it is that specifically when you're turning right, you click the turn signal all the way up into its position, you make the turn, you start straightening out your steering wheel, the stalk itself clicks back into the center position, and when it does so, it either springs back so hard or there's some sort of hardware issue or design flaw to where it implements the left turn signal after you're already straightened out, and it does the 3 flash or the quick flash succession after you made a right turn. So hopefully all of that makes sense, and hopefully I'll be able to capture it on camera for you guys. But I don't understand what this is and how it hasn't been solved already, because this happened like the second or third time I turned right inside this Equinox, and it's actually happened 4 different times over the last week with it. And it's quite annoying because you'll be making a right turn, you're going straight, and then all of a sudden the left turn signal comes on, and it's just like, what the heck is the issue here? It's something that GM has, implemented with this new design in their latest generation vehicles, and it's something that bothers the heck out of me because at the end of the day, it's a quality issue. And I know there's like Colorado and Canyon owners out there who have complained about it on forums, and I'm sure there's other models as well. So that issue is still relevant here in this Equinox and among a couple other GM models also. My next dislike is going to be the fact there is no premium audio offered at all in any Equinox or Equinox EV, even for that matter. This was something that was offered in the previous Equinox, Bose premium audio system, but there is 0 premium audio as of the 2025 model year. So you get a standard 6-speaker audio system. It actually sounds quite poor. The average person might find it acceptable with the limited EQ adjustments you have available, but as a whole, if you like listening or enjoying music at higher volumes, it is quite poor performance inside this vehicle, and I think it's quite unacceptable for a vehicle that can hit $40,000 to not have a premium audio system, at least as an option. My fourth dislike with this vehicle is going to be the LED headlight shadow. So again, something I picked up on the first time I drove it at night. When you're driving this vehicle, the low beams in specific have this weird projection of light, and you notice it, especially when you're going around turns, you're turning on certain types of surfaces. There's just inconsistencies in the light output to where there's basically hot spots, and then there's dimmer lines that run, parallel with the actual vehicle. So it's just kind of an annoyance thing when you're driving, looking at the illuminated part of the road, and you see these, little lines or shadows in your projection. It's not uniform whatsoever, and again, it's just something to do with the LED projector design that they implemented, but just note there are some headlight shadows with the LED that lights themselves. My fifth dislike is going to be the fact that there is no Super Cruise availability on the Equinox, at least again for the 2025 model year. So GM has unfortunately limited this to some of the electric vehicles and some of the higher end internal combustion, starting with the Traverse in the lineup and then all the way up to, of course, the Tahoe Suburban have it. Even the Silverados had it, but Equinox unfortunately does not have Super Cruise availability, which means there is no lane centering capability for the driver assistance technology. It does come with adaptive cruise control, the kind of more ping pong lane keeping assist, forward collision avoidance, rear parking sensors, etc. But no lane centering and no more advanced Super Cruise, which I think is a highlight for General Motors products. Now, my next dislike is one specific that I think GM has excelled at over the last 10, 20 plus years, and that is going to be the automatic HVAC control system. Now, HVAC in general, I think, has always been a General Motors strong suit. It warms up quickly, it blows cold quickly, it gets a little bit colder, I think, than some other manufacturers out there in terms of its ice cold AC in hot summer months. But for whatever reason in the Equinox, the automatic setting in particular is quite poor in its performance and is a little bit odd and strange at times. So the issues I have with it is automatic mode for the dual zone automatic climate gives you 3 different maximum fan speeds on the infotainment you can choose. So basically, if you push the automatic HVAC button, it will limit the fan speed, or it should limit the fan speed to either low, medium, or high based on whatever you have it set at. Now, the issue I have with the automatic setting is it blows, even on the lowest setting, it blows way too hard to the point where it feels like there's a whirlwind going on in here, and it's just way higher of a fan speed than it needs to be to maintain the interior temperature you have it set at. And I'm saying this as it's not when you first start up the vehicle and it's trying to get to that temperature that you're at. It's when you're already at your set interior temperature, the fan speed is still running way higher than it needs to be. And right now I'm not even in auto because I had to turn it down to film this clip, but it puts the fan speed at like level 4 or 5, and it's just higher than it needs to be. I don't understand why this is. And even on the touchscreen, when you have the climate menu pulled up on the screen itself, you click auto, it automatically shows the bar for the fan at max, even though the fan isn't at max. So there's just these weird software bugs, glitches. I don't know what's going on with the HVAC system, but using auto mode is frustratingly bad or poor performance for whatever reason. And this is something that, like I said, I think GM has done extremely, extremely well in the past. So not exactly sure if it's related to this new, connected technology or whatever they're putting inside their vehicles, but I don't like the automatic climate control inside this vehicle because the settings, the fan speed shouldn't be as high as it is on low. And it's just, kind of inconsistent in what it's displaying up here on the touchscreen. My next dislike is going to be the headrest comfort. Now, I mentioned this in the like section of this video as the caveat. It's going to be here in the dislikes because I think for my type, I have spinal fusion. I know there's other people out there with back issues or have had spinal fusion similar to me or whatnot, but the headrest protrudes too far towards the front of the vehicle to where it starts forcing your head down like this. So you have to recline the seat back to get the headrest back far enough to where you can look kind of forward, straight out of the vehicle in a comfortable driving position. And this, at the end of the day, puts you farther away from the steering wheel, and it's just kind of a wonky situation. It's worse in the Blazer EV, but definitely not the best here in the Equinox. So overall, a little bit disappointing that the headrests are uncomfortable here in this vehicle, given the seats themselves are extremely nice and extremely plush. My next dislike is going to be the integrated software buttons for things like headlight control. You have, let's see what other controls you have up here. You have fog lights, dome lights, power window lockout, your 360 cameras up here, and even traction control is implemented all via software buttons. So you still have a lot of physical controls here in the Equinox, including here to the left of the steering wheel. You have all-wheel drive, dash illumination, automatic vehicle hold, electronic parking brake. But things like your headlights, fog lights, parking assist, power window lockout, etc. have all been moved into the infotainment system only, and I don't love that fact, because in theory, if the screen goes out and you can't operate the screen, you can no longer operate the headlights. Now, one would argue your headlights should always be on auto, which I totally agree with. They should always be on automatic. There's really no reason to touch them. But some people, for whatever reason, like to manually control their headlights, which, again, I don't know why. They're all on the screen. So doing any of these functions are now buttons on the screen. I don't love that. Just to turn on your fog lights, you have to hit the menu button and then click fog lights to turn them on. Not exactly sure why that is, but GM has started doing that. So just note, you have some software buttons which were normally physical hard touch buttons. Now, I think my last dislike with the Equinox is somewhat of a subjective one, but it's going to be the power output from the 1.5 liter turbo engine in specific. So under the hood, you're going to find that engine. It's less than 200 horsepower and just over 200 pound-feet of torque with the 8-speed automatic transmission. And acceleration inside this vehicle is, for lack of a better words, a little lackluster. Now, is it adequate for the average user? Yes, I think it is, but there's certain situations where even under my normal driving, I found the engine revving up to 3,000, 4,000 RPM or even higher if you need to do a quick pass out on the interstate or whatnot. And unfortunately, the 2-liter turbo that was once offered in the Equinox and even a diesel powertrain way back is no longer offered in this current iteration. Now, I think the 2-liter turbo, had that still been available, would be an outstanding positive aspect of the Equinox and really would change my opinions of how the vehicle drives and would really match the ride quality, the smoothness, refinement, all of those aspects much better than only offering the 1.5 liter turbo. Now, I know there's talks out there of maybe a hybrid powertrain coming to GM's lineup. Maybe it would be a good fit here in the Equinox. I think it would be. Anything that could provide a little bit more power to this vehicle, given the weight and what it has to lug around, I think would be overall very, very positive, considering competitor to this vehicle might have a very similar base powertrain that offers under 200 horsepower, but typically most of the competition offers optional powertrains with well over 200 horsepower, pushing 250 or even a little bit more than that, either in hybrid or gas forms. And unfortunately, the Equinox does not have that. So you're forced to have the 1.5 liter turbo, which unfortunately is lackluster in its acceleration and performance. But if you don't value that at all and you just do like putzing around city, it is adequate. And like I said, it is quite smooth at the end of the day because they've likely been refining it for many, many years. So I think that is going to do it here for my list of dedicated likes and dislikes with the 2025 Chevy Equinox here in the RS trim level. Now, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and or found something helpful. As always, if you did, make sure to hit that like button below, subscribe if you haven't already, and I want to give a huge thanks to Chevy for sending this vehicle out for me to test and review. I've always really liked the Equinox and thought it offered a kind of a unique take on the compact SUV space. I think as that last generation was offered out on the market, it really did start to show its age quite a little bit. But I think with the 2025 model year and the heavy refresh that GM did, it definitely brought some new life to the Equinox. And I really foresee this vehicle doing quite well, and a lot of people out there really liking it, much like that of the previous generation. Now, there are some things that really puzzled me inside this vehicle, the HVAC being one of them, the no or lack of premium audio system, and the software integrated buttons and stuff like that. But as a whole, I'm not sure that is going to be enough to shy away buyers that have previously looked at the Equinox, although it may give them pause if they're used to that last generation or previous generations of the vehicle, given that so much has changed in a relatively short amount of time. So I think I'm just going to leave it at that. Unfortunately, no 2-liter turbo, no optional, hybrid powertrain, just the base gas engine kind of keeps this vehicle moving along. And I think that is ultimately what is going to hurt this vehicle, as a lot of people out there want to transition into either fully electric and or hybrid setups for not only the powertrain, but also going to be the fuel economy benefits. And the Equinox, kind of just, offers, what it has to offer. And I think that is ultimately going to be a negative in today's, compact SUV space. So overall, you guys have to let me know your thoughts and opinions on the 2025 Equinox down in the comment section below. This was one of the vehicles that I saw very, very early on at the 2024 Chicago Auto Show in a very early pre-production form in the Activ trim level, and I'm glad these vehicles are now readily available on dealership lots in very good quantities, so you should not have an issue finding this vehicle. And different color combinations, trim levels, etc. And the RS or the Activ would definitely be my two picks, although the LT does make a very good case for itself for in the low $30,000 price range for a value proposition. So definitely, play around with the trims, which one you might prefer. But overall, there's going to be about a $10,000 spread between the base price and the fully loaded one with panoramic sunroof, etc. So like I said, leave all your comments down in the comment section below. Huge thanks to Chevy once again for sending this vehicle out for me to test and review. And as always, I hope to see you guys in the next one.